In this last and final Pingcast Wahoo for Chapter 9, we're going to look at financial analysis as it relates to what we've been talking about in this chapter, to our current assets, particularly accounts receivable. You'll recall, I know you're tired of this, but it makes a point, that we give financial reports to external users so they can analyze the results of our operations and make decisions based on them. They often use ratio analysis, which takes and compares a couple of numbers on the financial statement against each other. We are going to learn 3 ratios in this chapter. Wahoo! The acid test ratio, which is a more stringent version of the current ratio we already learned. We'll review that just so you can look at them together and see how it is a more stringent test. Well, you've already seen that one. We'll look at the accounts receivable turnover ratio. We did one similar to that when we looked at inventory turnover. This time we'll look at accounts receivable turnover, and then we'll look at days sales in accounts receivable and receivables. We did this also in the inventory chapter, so all of these should look familiar to you. I'm going to start with the current ratio so you can remember what we did there. The current ratio is a measure of liquidity, and it takes current assets and it divides it by current liabilities. And it tells you for every dollar you have in current liabilities how much you have in current assets. It's a measure of liquidity. We said we like to see this. I used to like to say 2 to 1. So you had 2 times as many assets as you had current liabilities, because you can't pay bills with some of them. But recent trends have seen 1.5 being the number. For every dollar you have in current liabilities, you have $1.50 in current assets. I guess as a society we've become more debt tolerant. And again, that's current assets divided by current liabilities. Let's compare that to the more stringent test, the acid ratio, the acid test ratio. Just for your reference, this is also known as the quick ratio, how quickly you can get cash. And it limits the amount of cash, current assets you can use in the denominator. What it wants you to do is take cash plus cash equivalents, those things that convert to cash within 90 days, cash plus cash equivalents plus any net current receivables, notes or accounts receivable, and divide that by current liabilities. What it pulls out of the numerator, by not using total current assets, essentially you've pulled out inventory and prepaids. And the thought is that you can't use inventory and prepaids to pay your current liabilities. And so this is a more stringent test of how liquid you are. Still another liquidity ratio. What is a desirable current or quick ratio? That's hard to answer, because it really depends on the industry you're in. But a general rule of thumb is 1 to 1. You have enough current assets to pay those current liabilities as they come due. The accounts receivable turnover ratio is next, and this is an efficiency measure. It lets outsiders take a look at how efficiently you're managing your accounts receivable. The formula is to take net sales, net credit sales, goes into your accounts receivable, and divide it by your average net accounts receivable. Now remember, you're taking a number, in this case, from the income statement and comparing it to a number from the balance sheet. And whenever we do that, we average the balance sheet number, so it's more reflective of the period covered on the income statement. So it's beginning net AR plus ending net accounts receivable. Add those together and divide by 2. That number then is more reflective of the average accounts receivable, and it's better compared to an income statement number. So that's our accounts receivable turnover ratio. One more to go. Day sales and receivables. This one's also like what we did with inventory. Instead of using the accounts receivable turnover ratio, we use instead of using the inventory turnover ratio, we use the accounts receivable ratio. The formula is to take 365 days in a year, and it is 365, not 360, and divide that by the turnover you calculated above. And that tells you how many days, on average, things sit in your accounts receivable. If your terms of your credit sales are 210 net 30, it seems like you would want to see this number be 45 days or less, doesn't it? Seems like that to me. This is also an efficiency measure. So, what ratios did we add? We reviewed the current ratio, a measure of liquidity, current assets divided by current liabilities. Desired effect is somewhere between 1.5 and 2. I can still say that. The acid test ratio, which is the same kind of ratio but it's a more stringent version, pulls out prepaids and inventory from that numerator and just leaves cash, cash equivalents, net current receivables divided by current liabilities. The target being somewhere around 1. Again, measuring liquidity. Then we looked at a couple accounts receivable efficiency ratios. Accounts receivable turnover, which is net credit sales divided by your average AR. Don't forget to average beginning and ending accounts receivable when you do your denominator. And then your day sales in receivables, 365 divided by that turnover. Now remember, ratio analysis. I'm going to come up to the top a little. I have some real estate up here. The ratio taken by itself is just a number, but when looked at over a period of time, allows you to spot a trend. Are they becoming more liquid or less? Are they being efficient, more efficient or less efficient in how they handle accounts receivable? And it also allows you to compare yourself with your competitors. Are you doing as well as your competitors or not as well? And it's best done for several years so you can spot these trends. I've assigned a problem out of my accounting lab that will allow you to practice the calculation of these ratios. We've seen them, or some that are very similar, so I'm comfortable that just reviewing what they are and what they mean will be enough for you. Thank you so much for joining me on this review for final on Chapter 9. I'm hoping you ace the test on Chapter 9, and you will. Study hard and do well. Key here, study hard. Bye for now.